Why do we crave approval from others, and what does Stoicism have to say about it? Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." At first glance, this might seem like a simple statement, but when you really think about it, it challenges something deep within us: our desire to be liked, accepted, and validated by others. Today, we're going to explore a powerful Stoic idea: that being liked isn't a Stoic's goal, and why it shouldn't be yours either. Stoicism teaches us that external validation, whether it's praise, approval, or even criticism, is ultimately beyond our control. Instead, what truly matters is how we choose to respond to these external forces. This philosophy invites us to shift our focus inward, towards self-mastery, virtue, and living in alignment with our true values. But let's be honest, that's easier said than done. In a world where likes, comments, and social approval often feel like the measure of our worth, how do we detach from the opinions of others and find peace within ourselves? In this video, we'll break down key Stoic principles that can help you do just that. We'll explore why seeking approval can hold you back, how to cultivate a sense of inner stability, and why focusing on what you can control, your actions, your character, and your choices, is the path to true freedom. By the end, you'll see why being liked isn't the ultimate goal, and how embracing this mindset can transform the way you live your life. So, let's dive in. We often believe we can control how others perceive us, but Stoicism teaches us otherwise. At its core, Stoicism is about understanding where our power truly lies and where it doesn't. One of the most foundational Stoic principles is the dichotomy of control, which divides the world into two categories: things we can control and things we can't. Our thoughts, actions, and choices, those are within our sphere of influence. But other people's opinions, judgments, or reactions, those are entirely outside of it. One of Stoicism's most famous practitioners put it this way: "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." It's a simple yet profound reminder that we can't dictate how others see us, no matter how hard we try. And yet, so much of our energy is spent chasing approval, likes, or validation from others. Think about it. How often do you find yourself crafting the perfect social media post, rehearsing a conversation in your head, or tailoring your behavior just to be liked? We've all been there. But here's the question: is that energy well spent? The truth is, when we focus on trying to control what others think of us, we're investing in something that's fundamentally out of our hands. And that's not just exhausting, it's ultimately futile. Imagine pouring water into a bucket with holes. No matter how much you pour, it'll never fill up. The same goes for seeking approval. The more you chase it, the more it slips away. So what's the alternative? Stoicism invites us to shift our focus inward to the things we can control. Instead of worrying about how others perceive us, we can focus on how we perceive ourselves. Are we acting with integrity? Are we staying true to our values? Are we doing our best, regardless of what others might think? These are the questions that matter. When we anchor ourselves in what's within our control, we free ourselves from the endless cycle of seeking external validation. Take a moment to reflect. How much of your day is spent trying to shape others' opinions of you? And how much of that effort actually brings you peace or fulfillment? The Stoics would argue that the answer lies not in controlling the uncontrollable, but in mastering what's truly ours, our own minds and actions. And when we do that, we find a kind of freedom that no amount of approval can ever provide. What matters more, being virtuous or being liked? It's a question that cuts to the heart of how we live our lives. For the Stoics, the answer was clear. Virtue is the only true good, while external approval, whether it's praise, popularity, or social validation, is indifferent. It's not that being liked is inherently bad, it's just that it doesn't hold the same weight as living with integrity. As Seneca once put it, popularity is a fleeting thing, it comes and goes with the wind. And if we build our sense of self-worth on something so unstable, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment. The Stoics believed that the only thing truly within our control is our character, our ability to act with wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline. Everything else, what others think of us, whether we're praised or criticized, is outside our control. And because it's outside our control, it's not worth sacrificing our values for. Think about it. How often have you bent your principles just to fit in or gain someone's approval? Maybe you've stayed silent when you should have spoken up, or gone along with something that didn't sit right with you, all because you didn't want to rock the boat. The Stoics would argue that this kind of compromise chips away at your moral integrity, and over time, it can leave you feeling hollow. Now let's bring this into the modern world. Imagine you're in a meeting at work and your team is discussing a project. You notice a flaw in the plan, something that could have serious consequences down the line. But speaking up might make you unpopular, especially if others are invested in the current direction. Do you stay quiet to keep the peace, or do you voice your concerns even if it risks upsetting people? The Stoic approach would be to prioritize what's right over what's easy. It's not about being confrontational or seeking conflict. It's about aligning your actions with your values, regardless of how others might react. Here's the thing, when we chase popularity, we give away our power. We start living for others' expectations instead of our own principles, and in doing so, we lose sight of what really matters. The Stoics remind us that true freedom comes from within, from knowing that we've acted with integrity even when it wasn't the popular choice. So, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever compromised your values for approval? And if so, what might it look like to choose virtue over popularity the next time you're faced with that choice? It's not always easy, but as the Stoics would say, it's always worth it. In ancient Rome, leaders like Emperor Nero and Caligula were infamous for their desperate pursuit of public favor. They staged lavish games, distributed free grain, and even built monumental structures, all to win the approval of the masses. But this relentless chase for external validation came at a steep cost. Their principles eroded, their decisions became erratic, and their reigns ended in chaos. The very people they sought to please turned against them, proving how fragile and fleeting public approval can be. This historical lesson isn't just a relic of the past. It's a timeless warning about the dangers of placing too much value on what others think of us. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus put it starkly: if you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters. In other words, don't let the opinions of others dictate your worth or your actions. When we tie our happiness to external validation, we give away our power. We become like a boat tossed by the waves, constantly seeking direction from forces outside our control. This instability not only undermines our sense of self, but also makes us vulnerable to the whims of others. Now, consider a modern parallel: social media. How often do we measure our worth by the number of likes, comments, or followers we accumulate? Each notification becomes a tiny hit of validation, but it's a hollow victory. The more we chase these external markers of approval, the more we risk losing sight of who we truly are. The Stoics would argue that this pursuit is not only futile but also harmful. It distracts us from cultivating inner strength and living in alignment with our values. So take a moment to reflect. How much of your happiness is tied to what others think of you? Are you making decisions based on your own principles, or are you bending to the expectations of others? The danger of external validation lies not just in its instability, but in its ability to pull us away from our true selves. By recognizing this, we can begin to reclaim our focus and prioritize what truly matters, our own growth, integrity, and peace of mind. Stoicism teaches that true peace comes from within, not from others' approval. This idea might sound simple, but it's a profound shift in how we view our emotions and interactions with the world. At its core, self-mastery, a central practice in Stoic philosophy, is about cultivating control over our own thoughts and reactions, rather than being swept away by the opinions or actions of others. One of history's most famous Stoics once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. This isn't just a lofty ideal, it's a practical tool for navigating life's challenges. Imagine this: you're at work, and a colleague criticizes your project in front of others. Your first instinct might be to feel defensive, hurt, or even angry. But what if, instead of reacting emotionally, you paused and reminded yourself that their words don't define your worth? This is where self-mastery comes in. By focusing on what you can control, your response, you free yourself from the need for their approval or validation. You're no longer a puppet to their opinions, you're the one holding the strings. So how do we cultivate this kind of inner peace? It starts with small, deliberate practices. For instance, when faced with criticism or judgment, take a moment to reflect. Is this feedback true? If so, use it to grow. If not, let it go. The key is to detach your sense of self from external validation. It's not about becoming indifferent to others, but about building an unshakable foundation within yourself. What would it feel like to face criticism with calmness? Not because you don't care, but because you trust your own values and judgment. This is the essence of Stoic self-mastery, a journey toward inner tranquility that doesn't rely on the unpredictable tides of others' opinions. And while it's not always easy, it's a practice that can transform how we experience the world. So, the next time you find yourself seeking approval or fearing judgment, ask yourself, how can I shift my focus inward? How can I strengthen my own sense of peace? Regardless of what others think, why do we care so much about what others think of us? It's a question that can feel almost universal, yet the answer often lies in how we interpret the judgments of others. The Stoics had a profound insight here. Other people's opinions of us are not about us at all, they're about them. Their judgments are shaped by their own perceptions, biases, and experiences, not by any objective truth about who we are or what we're doing. This is where Stoicism offers a powerful perspective shift. As Epictetus once said, if someone tells you that so-and-so speaks ill of you, don't defend yourself against what was said, but reply, he doesn't know my other faults, or he would have mentioned them as well. In other words, when someone judges you, it's their own lens speaking, not a reflection of your worth or reality. Let's bring this to life with an example. Imagine you've chosen a career path that's meaningful to you, but others criticize it because it doesn't align with their expectations. Maybe they say it's not prestigious enough, or it doesn't pay well, or it's not what they would have chosen for you. It's easy to feel hurt or defensive in that moment, to let their words weigh on you. But here's the Stoic question to ask yourself. Are their judgments based on your values or theirs? Are they speaking from a place of understanding your life? Or are they projecting their own fears, insecurities, or desires onto you? The Stoic approach isn't about dismissing others' opinions outright. It's about recognizing that their judgments are ultimately their own business, not yours. You can't control what others think of you, but you can control how much power you give those thoughts. This isn't always easy, of course. We're wired to seek approval and validation from those around us. But when you start to see judgments for what they are, external noise, not internal truth, you free yourself to focus on what truly matters, living in alignment with your own values and principles. So, the next time you feel the weight of someone else's opinion, take a step back. Ask yourself, is this judgment rooted in reality, or is it simply a reflection of their own perspective? And more importantly, does it align with the life you want to live? Stoicism teaches us to focus on what we can control, our actions and reactions. This principle is particularly powerful when it comes to the desire for approval. Think about it. You can't control whether someone likes you, agrees with you, or approves of your choices. But you can control how you respond to their opinions, how you carry yourself, and the values you choose to live by. One of Stoicism's most famous practitioners put it this way: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. In other words, your worth isn't determined by how others see you, but by how you see yourself and the integrity of your actions. Let's take a practical example. Imagine someone criticizes you, maybe it's a colleague, a friend, or even a stranger online. Your instinct might be to defend yourself, to argue, or to seek their approval by changing their opinion. But here's the Stoic approach. Instead of reacting impulsively, take a step back. Ask yourself, is this criticism something I can control? Is it true, or is it simply their perspective? If it's true, you can choose to learn from it without letting it shake your sense of self-worth. If it's not, you can let it go, knowing that their opinion is ultimately outside your control. Now think about your own life. Where do you find yourself seeking approval? Is it at work, in your relationships, or even on social media? Take a moment to reflect on what you can control in those situations. Maybe it's how you prepare for a presentation, how you communicate with a loved one, or how much time you spend comparing yourself to others online. By shifting your focus to what's within your power, you not only free yourself from the weight of others' expectations, but also cultivate a deeper sense of inner peace and confidence. That's the heart of Stoicism, not chasing external validation, but building a life rooted in your own values and actions. Think about Alexander the Great for a moment. At the height of his power, he was celebrated as one of the greatest conquerors in history, his name echoing across continents. Yet, centuries later, how many of us truly remember the details of his life or the impact of his empire? Even the most revered leaders, the ones who seemed untouchable in their time, eventually fade into the pages of history. This isn't a commentary on their greatness. It's a reminder of how fleeting human approval truly is. The Stoics understood this deeply. Seneca, one of the most influential Stoic philosophers, once wrote, "What is fame? The echo of a voice, the shadow of a dream." It's a striking image, isn't it? Fame, approval, admiration. These things are as temporary and insubstantial as a shadow. They vanish the moment the light shifts. And yet, how often do we chase after them as if they could define our worth or bring us lasting happiness? Let's bring this into the modern world for a moment. Consider the rise and fall of social media influencers. One day, someone might have millions of followers, their every post celebrated and shared. But trends change, algorithms shift, and just like that, the same person who was once at the center of attention can find themselves forgotten, replaced by the next big thing. It's a stark reminder that the approval of others is not only temporary but entirely out of our control. So here's a question to reflect on. How much of your energy are you spending trying to win the approval of others? And how much of that approval will truly matter in the long run? The Stoics argued that placing your happiness in the hands of others, whether it's through fame, praise, or admiration, is a recipe for disappointment. Because no matter how much approval you gain today, it can all disappear tomorrow. And when it does, what will you be left with? This isn't to say that recognition or connection with others is meaningless, but the Stoic approach is to focus on what's within your control. Your own character, your actions, your values. These are the things that endure long after the applause has faded. What happens when we stop worrying about whether others like us? It's a question that might feel uncomfortable at first, but it's at the heart of Stoic philosophy. The Stoics teach us that our peace of mind doesn't depend on external validation, whether it's praise, approval, or even being liked. Instead, it comes from how we choose to respond to the world around us. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic teachers, put it simply, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This idea of detachment isn't about indifference or apathy. It's about freeing ourselves from the emotional of trying to control what's outside our power. Let's take a moment to think about a common scenario. Imagine you've worked incredibly hard on a project at work, poured your energy into it, and yet, when it's presented, you receive little to no recognition. It's easy to feel overlooked, maybe even resentful. But what if, instead of letting that lack of recognition upset you, you chose to focus on what you can control, your effort, your dedication, and your own sense of accomplishment? That's detachment in action. It's not about denying the value of recognition. It's about not letting its absence define your worth. This kind of mindset shift isn't just about work. It applies to every area of life. Think about a time when you felt hurt because someone didn't seem to like you or appreciate you. What if you could approach that situation with the same calm acceptance? What if, instead of seeking approval, you could find contentment in simply being true to yourself? Detachment from outcomes doesn't mean you stop caring about relationships or goals. It means you stop letting the fear of rejection or failure dictate your emotions. When you detach, you create space for clarity, resilience, and even joy. You begin to see that your value isn't tied to how others perceive you. It's rooted in the choices you make and the person you choose to be. So take a moment to reflect. Where in your life could detachment help you find more peace? What would it feel like to let go of the need for others, approval, and focus instead on what truly matters to you? Stoicism teaches us that self-acceptance is far more important than seeking external approval. At its core, Stoic philosophy emphasizes virtue, living in alignment with reason, wisdom, and integrity. And self-acceptance is a key part of that virtuous life. Why? Because when we truly accept ourselves, flaws and all, we stop relying on others to validate our worth. We become less swayed by praise or criticism and more focused on living authentically. As once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That strength begins with accepting who you are right here, right now. Think about it this way. When we chase external approval, we're essentially giving others control over our happiness. But when we practice self-acceptance, we reclaim that power. It's not about ignoring our imperfections or pretending we're flawless. It's about acknowledging them, learning from them, and still choosing to value ourselves. For example, imagine someone who struggles with public speaking. Instead of berating themselves for being nervous or seeking constant reassurance from others, they could accept their anxiety as part of their current reality. They might say, "This is where I am right now, and that's okay. I'll work on improving, but I don't need to be perfect to be worthy." So how can you practice self-acceptance in your own life? Start by reflecting on the areas where you're hardest on yourself. Maybe it's your appearance, your career, or even your relationships. Ask yourself, am I holding myself to an unrealistic standard? Am I seeking approval from others to feel good about myself? Then, take a step towards self-compassion. Remind yourself that growth is a process and you don't need to be flawless to be valuable. After all, as the Stoics would say, true virtue comes from within, not from the opinions of others. Rejection is inevitable, but Stoicism teaches us how to handle it with grace. Think about it. No matter who you are or what you do, There will be moments when others do like you, don't choose you, or don't see your value. And while that can sting, Stoicism offers a powerful framework for turning that sting into strength. The Stoics believed that resilience wasn't just about enduring hardship. It was about transforming it into an opportunity for growth. As Seneca once wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." What he's saying here is that rejection, as painful as it might feel in the moment, can actually sharpen your character if you let it. Let's take a practical example. Imagine you've poured your heart into a job application. You've prepared, you've interviewed, and you feel confident. But then the call comes, they've chosen someone else. In that moment, it's easy to spiral into self-doubt or even resentment. But what if, instead of letting that rejection define you, you saw it as a chance to refine yourself? The Stoics would remind you that the job itself, whether you got it or not, was never fully within your control. What is within your control is how you respond. You can choose to see the rejection as a reflection of your worth, or you can view it as a stepping stone, a lesson in perseverance. So here's a question to reflect on. How do you typically respond to rejection? Do you let it knock you down, or do you use it as a chance to stand taller? Building resilience isn't about pretending rejection doesn't hurt. It's about acknowledging the hurt and then asking yourself, what can I learn from this? When you start to see rejection as a teacher rather than an enemy, you begin to cultivate the kind of inner strength that no one can take away from you. And that's the Stoic way, not just to survive rejection, but to thrive because of it. What if we stopped caring whether others liked us? What would that kind of life look like? It might sound counterintuitive at first. After all, we're wired to seek connection and approval. But the Stoics had a radical idea. True freedom comes from indifference to things outside our control, including the opinions of others. Epictetus, one of Stoicism's great teachers, put it this way: freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. In other words, when we stop tying our self-worth to how others see us, we unlock a profound sense of liberation. Think about it, how much of your energy goes into worrying about whether people approve of you? Do you find yourself constantly checking social media, hoping for likes or fearing criticism? That's a modern version of what the Stoics warned against. They believed that by placing too much importance on external validation, we give away our power. But here's the thing. Indifference doesn't mean apathy. It's not about becoming cold or uncaring. It's about shifting your focus inward to what you can control, your own thoughts, actions, and values. Imagine this: you post something online, and instead of refreshing the page to see how many people liked it, you simply let it go. You don't need the approval to feel good about what you've shared because your sense of worth isn't tied to it. That's the freedom of indifference. It's not about rejecting connection or relationships. It's about not letting them dictate your happiness. So take a moment to reflect. How much freer would you feel if you stopped letting others' opinions shape your self-esteem? What could you do with that energy instead? Stoicism places a profound emphasis on authenticity over conformity, urging us to live in alignment with our true nature rather than bending to external pressures. At its core, this philosophy teaches that virtue, our highest good, is rooted in being honest with ourselves and others. One of the most renowned Stoic thinkers once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one." This simple yet powerful statement reminds us that living authentically isn't about seeking approval or fitting into societal molds. It's about embodying integrity and staying true to our principles, even when it's difficult. Think about a moment when you felt compelled to agree with the crowd, even when it didn't sit right with you. Maybe it was a conversation where your true opinion felt risky to share, or a situation where going along with the group felt easier than standing apart. Stoicism challenges us to resist that pull toward conformity. It asks us to speak our minds, not for the sake of being contrarian, but because doing so aligns with our inner compass. When we act authentically, we honor our values and cultivate a sense of inner peace, knowing we've stayed true to ourselves. To illustrate this, consider the example of someone who speaks up in a meeting, voicing an unpopular opinion because they believe it's the right thing to do. That person might face resistance or even criticism, but by staying authentic, they demonstrate courage and integrity, two qualities deeply valued in Stoic philosophy. These moments of authenticity, though sometimes uncomfortable, are where we grow and strengthen our character. So, take a moment to reflect. Where in your life might you be holding back your true thoughts or actions out of fear of judgment? How can you begin to align your choices more closely with your values, even when it feels challenging? Remember, authenticity isn't about perfection or always getting it right. It's about striving to live in harmony with your nature, one honest step at a time. This is the Stoic path to virtue, and it's a journey worth pursuing. How can reason help us overcome the desire for approval? This is where Stoicism offers us a powerful tool. The Stoics believed that reason is the foundation of a well-lived life, the guiding force that allows us to rise above our emotions and desires. Seneca once wrote, "Reason is the greatest good, the one thing that sets us apart from the beasts." It's not about suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. It's about using reason to understand them, to question their validity, and to choose how we respond. Think about it. When we crave approval, we're often reacting to an irrational fear, the fear of being rejected, judged, or overlooked. But reason steps in and asks, why does this person's opinion matter so much? Is their judgment based on truth, or is it just a fleeting impression? By engaging with these questions, we can dismantle the power that approval-seeking holds over us. Reason helps us see that our worth isn't tied to what others think of us. It reminds us that we have the capacity to define our own value, independent of external validation. Consider this scenario. Imagine you're at a social event and you're worried about saying something awkward or being judged. Instead of letting that fear control you, reason intervenes. It asks, what's the worst that could happen? Even if someone thinks poorly of you, does that truly diminish your worth? By stepping back and applying reason, you can approach the situation with calm and confidence, free from the weight of needing everyone's approval. So how can you use reason in your own life? Start by noticing the moments when you feel the pull of approval seeking. Pause and ask yourself, is this desire based on logic, or is it driven by an irrational fear? Over time, this practice can help you detach from the need to be liked and focus instead on what truly matters, living in alignment with your values and principles. Reason, as the Stoics taught, is the compass that guides us back to ourselves, helping us navigate life's challenges with clarity and purpose. Stoicism teaches us a profound truth. Perfection is an illusion. It's not something we can grasp or achieve, no matter how hard we try. And yet, so many of us chase it relentlessly, often because we're seeking approval or validation from others. Think about it. How often do you push yourself to meet impossible standards, not because it truly serves you, but because you want to be liked, admired, or accepted? This is where the Stoics offer a different perspective. Epictetus once said, "No great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me that you desire a fig, I answer you that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen." In other words, everything has its natural process, and trying to force perfection only leads to frustration and disappointment. Consider the workplace, for example. How many times have you stayed late, agonizing over a project, trying to make it flawless, only to realize that no one even noticed the extra effort. Or worse, you burned yourself out trying to meet an unattainable standard that no one actually expected of you. The truth is, perfectionism often stems from a fear of judgment, a fear that if we're not perfect, we won't be enough. But here's the thing. The Stoics remind us that we're already enough just as we are. Imperfection isn't a flaw, it's part of being human. So how can we let go of this need for perfection? Start by recognizing that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to be a work in progress. Instead of obsessing over every detail, focus on doing your best and accepting that sometimes good enough is exactly that, enough. Reflect on where in your life you might be holding yourself to an unrealistic standard. Is it at work, in your relationships, or even in how you see yourself? Take a moment to pause and ask, what would it feel like to release that pressure, to embrace imperfection as a natural part of growth? The Stoics didn't aim to be flawless. They aimed to be resilient, grounded, and true to themselves. And that's a goal worth striving for. Why do Stoics value solitude? It's not about escaping the world or isolating yourself from others. Instead, solitude is a tool, a way to step back and reconnect with yourself, free from the noise of external opinions. Once wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." Think about that for a moment. In the quiet of solitude, we're able to detach from the constant need for approval, the endless chase for likes, comments, or validation from others. It's in those moments alone that we can hear our own thoughts clearly, untangled from the expectations of the world around us. Imagine taking a break from social media for a day or even just an hour. No scrolling, no notifications, no comparing your life to someone else's highlight reel. What would you notice? Maybe a sense of calm, a chance to reflect on what truly matters to you, rather than what others think should matter. Solitude isn't about loneliness. It's about creating space to cultivate your inner strength and clarity. It's a reminder that your worth isn't tied to how many people like or admire you, but to how grounded and aligned you are with your own values. So how could solitude benefit you? Could it help you step away from the constant need for external validation? Could it give you the chance to focus on what's truly important without the distractions of the outside world? These are questions worth considering, because in the stillness of solitude, we often find the answers we've been searching for, not in the opinions of others, but within ourselves. Gratitude shifts our focus from what we lack to what we already have, and this simple shift in perspective is deeply rooted in Stoic philosophy. The Stoics believe that true contentment comes not from external validation or chasing what we don't possess, but from finding peace in the present moment and appreciating the abundance already within our lives. Seneca, one of Stoicism's greatest thinkers, once wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future." This idea reminds us that gratitude isn't just a fleeting emotion. It's a practice, a way of grounding ourselves in the here and now and freeing ourselves from the endless pursuit of approval. When we practice gratitude, we're actively training our minds to focus on what's within our control rather than what's outside of it. This aligns perfectly with Stoic teachings, which emphasize that our power lies in how we perceive and respond to the world around us, not in how the world treats us. By appreciating what we have, whether it's the support of loved ones, the beauty of nature, or even the small comforts of daily life, we reduce the need for external validation. We stop measuring our worth by how others see us and start finding fulfillment in our own sense of appreciation. One practical way to cultivate this mindset is by keeping a gratitude journal. Each day, take a moment to write down 3 things you're grateful for. It could be as simple as a warm cup of coffee in the morning, a kind word from a friend, or the fact that you have the ability to learn and grow. Over time, this habit trains your mind to seek out the good, even in challenging circumstances. It's not about ignoring difficulties or pretending everything is perfect. It's about recognizing that even in the midst of struggle, there are still things to cherish. So take a moment to reflect. What are you grateful for today? Is it a relationship, an experience, or even a lesson learned from a tough situation? When we pause to acknowledge these gifts, we're not just practicing gratitude. We're embodying the Stoic ideal of finding strength and peace within ourselves, no matter what the outside world brings. How can Stoicism help us build healthier relationships? At first glance, you might think Stoicism is all about self-reliance and emotional detachment, but that's only part of the story. Stoicism also teaches us the value of meaningful connections, relationships built on trust, respect, and shared values, rather than the fleeting approval of others. It's not about isolating ourselves. It's about choosing the right company and investing in bonds that truly matter. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic teachers, put it this way: "The key is to keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best." This isn't about seeking perfection in others or expecting them to meet every need. It's about surrounding yourself with people who inspire growth, challenge you to be better, and align with your principles. Think about it. When you're around those who value honesty, integrity, and kindness, it becomes easier to embody those qualities yourself. Consider this example. Imagine you're at a social gathering where everyone is vying for attention, trying to impress one another. The energy is competitive, the conversation's shallow. Now, contrast that with a quiet evening spent with a close friend, someone who knows you deeply and accepts you as you are. Which scenario feels more fulfilling? Stoicism reminds us that the second option, the one rooted in authenticity, is where real connection thrives. So how can you cultivate better relationships in your own life? Start by asking yourself, are the people around you lifting you up or weighing you down? Are your interactions meaningful, or are they driven by a need to be liked? Stoicism doesn't tell us to abandon relationships. It encourages us to be intentional about the ones we nurture. Seek out those who share your values, who challenge you to grow, and who make you feel seen for who you truly are. This isn't always easy. Letting go of superficial connections or stepping away from toxic dynamics can be uncomfortable. But in doing so, you create space for relationships that enrich your life and align with your Stoic principles. After all, true fulfillment doesn't come from being liked by everyone. It comes from being deeply connected to the right few. Stoicism teaches us to see things as they are, not as we wish them to be. This idea is at the heart of what it means to live with clarity and purpose. When we focus on how things truly are, rather than how we want them to be, we free ourselves from the need for external validation. This shift in perspective is a powerful tool for detaching from the desire to be liked or approved of by others. Once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." What he's pointing to is the ability to step back, observe a situation objectively, and choose how we respond. It's not about denying reality, but about seeing it clearly, without the filters of emotion or ego. Let's take criticism, for example. When someone critiques us, it's easy to feel defensive, hurt, or even angry. But what if we reframed that criticism as feedback? What if, instead of seeing it as a personal attack, we viewed it as an opportunity to grow? This doesn't mean we have to agree with every piece of criticism we receive, but it does mean we can choose to approach it with curiosity rather than fear. By shifting our perspective, we take control of the narrative. We stop seeing the critic as someone who holds power over our self-worth, and start seeing the situation as a chance to reflect and improve. Think about a moment when you felt judged or misunderstood. How did you react? Did you feel the need to defend yourself or seek approval? Now imagine stepping back and asking, what can I learn from this? Or how can I approach this differently? This simple shift from seeking validation to seeking understanding can transform how you navigate challenges. It's not about ignoring your emotions, but about recognizing that your perspective shapes your experience. When we stop trying to control how others see us and start focusing on how we see ourselves, we gain a sense of freedom that no amount of approval can provide. So, the next time you feel the pull to be liked, pause and ask yourself, am I seeing this situation clearly, or am I filtering it through my need for approval? That moment of reflection might just change everything. So, how can mindfulness help us stop seeking approval? It's a question worth exploring, especially when we think about the constant pull of external validation in our lives. Mindfulness, at its core, is about being fully present, aware of our thoughts, emotions, and surroundings without judgment. And here, where it connects beautifully with Stoicism. Both practices encourage us to focus on what's within our control, letting go of the distractions and pressures that come from outside. Seneca once said, "The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today." This idea of living in the moment is central to both mindfulness and Stoicism. When we're caught up in worrying about what others think of us, we're not truly present. We're stuck in a mental loop of hypothetical scenarios. What if they don't like me? What if I fail to impress? Mindfulness pulls us back from that edge. It reminds us to anchor ourselves in the here and now, where we can act with clarity and purpose rather than react out of fear or insecurity. Think about a stressful situation you faced recently, maybe a presentation at work, a difficult conversation, or even just a crowded social event. In those moments, it's easy to get swept up in thoughts of how you're being perceived. But what if, instead of fixating on others' opinions, you focused on your breath, the sensation of your feet on the ground, or the task at hand? That's mindfulness in action. It's not about ignoring the world around you. It's about choosing where to direct your attention so you're not ruled by external judgments. This practice aligns perfectly with Stoic principles. Both teach us to detach from outcomes we can't control and to invest our energy in what we can influence, our own thoughts, actions, and responses. By being mindful, we create a buffer between ourselves and the noise of external approval. We become less reactive, more intentional, and ultimately more at peace with who we are. So, take a moment to reflect. How can you bring more mindfulness into your daily life? It doesn't have to be a formal meditation practice. It could be as simple as pausing to notice your surroundings during a walk, or taking a few deep breaths before responding to a challenging email. The goal is to train your mind to stay present, so you're no longer chasing after fleeting approval, but instead grounded in your own values and priorities. Stoicism teaches that courage is essential for living a virtuous life. It's not the kind of courage that demands grand, heroic gestures, though those have their place, but the quiet, steadfast bravery that allows us to stand by our principles, even when the world around us pushes back. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And how we react often requires courage, the kind that helps us stay true to ourselves, even when it's easier to go along with the crowd. Think about the last time you faced a situation where speaking up or standing firm felt uncomfortable. Maybe it was at work, when you had to challenge an unfair decision, or in a conversation with friends where you chose honesty over agreement. These moments might seem small, but they're anything but insignificant. Courage, in the Stoic sense, isn't about seeking applause or approval. It's about aligning your actions with your values, no matter the cost. Consider this. When you choose to act with integrity, even when it's unpopular, you're not just practicing courage, you're building resilience. Every time you stand by what you believe in, you reinforce your ability to face challenges with clarity and strength. And here's the thing, courage isn't something you're born with. It's a skill honed through practice. The more you exercise it, even in small ways, the more natural it becomes. So here's a question to reflect on. Where in your life could you lean into courage a little more? Maybe it's in setting boundaries, pursuing a goal that feels uncertain, or simply saying no when you need to. The Stoics remind us that living virtuously isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. And courage, it's the bridge that gets us there. Why do Stoics value humility over pride? It's not just about being modest or downplaying your achievements. Humility in Stoicism is a cornerstone of virtue, a way to align yourself with the natural order of the world. It's about recognizing that you are part of something much larger than yourself, and that your ego is not the center of the universe. Once warned, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. This stark reminder isn't meant to frighten us, but to ground us. Arrogance, he suggests, blinds us to our own impermanence and the interconnectedness of all things. When we cling to pride, we risk losing sight of what truly matters. Humility, on the other hand, frees us from the need for constant external validation. Think about it. When you're humble, you don't need others to praise you or affirm your worth. Your value comes from within, from living in accordance with reason and virtue. It's about being honest with yourself, acknowledging your limitations, and embracing the idea that you're always a work in progress. This doesn't mean diminishing your accomplishments. It means understanding that they don't define you. Let's take a practical example, admitting when you're wrong. It's not easy, is it? We all want to be right, to save face, to avoid the discomfort of owning up to a mistake. But humility asks us to do just that. It's in those moments of vulnerability that we grow. When you can say, "I made a mistake," without deflecting blame or making excuses, you're practicing true humility. You're showing strength, not weakness. So how can you cultivate this kind of humility in your own life? Start by reflecting on your actions and decisions. Ask yourself, am I doing this for applause, or am I doing it because it's the right thing to do? When you catch yourself seeking validation, pause. Remind yourself that your worth isn't tied to what others think of you. And when you do succeed, take a moment to appreciate the effort and the journey, not just the outcome. Humility isn't about denying your achievements. It's about keeping them in perspective. Imagine a life where you're no longer weighed down by the need to impress or outperform others, where you can move through the world with a quiet confidence, knowing that your actions are guided by reason and virtue, not by pride or fear. That's the power of humility, and it's a practice worth striving for every single day. Reflection is a cornerstone of Stoic practice, a tool for self-improvement that helps us stay aligned with our values and principles. It's not just about looking back at what we've done, but about understanding why we acted the way we did, and whether those actions truly reflect who we want to be. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, once wrote, "You must linger among a limited number of master thinkers and digest their works, if you would derive ideas which shall win firm hold in your mind." What he's pointing to here is the importance of self-examination, of taking the time to digest not just the wisdom of others, but also our own experiences. When we reflect, we create a space between our actions and our reactions. We step back and ask ourselves, was that response rooted in reason, or was it driven by the desire for approval or fear of rejection? This kind of honesty with ourselves is powerful because it strips away the need for external validation. If you act in alignment with your principles, the opinions of others lose their grip on you. You no longer feel the constant pull to be liked, because you've built a foundation of self-awareness and integrity. Let's take journaling as an example. A simple practice, but one that's deeply transformative when done consistently. At the end of each day, you might write about what went well, what didn't, and what you learned. Did you act with courage? Were you swayed by fear or the need for approval? These reflections help you identify patterns and make better choices moving forward. It's not about judging yourself harshly, but about growing and aligning more closely with your ideals. So how can you incorporate reflection into your own life? It doesn't have to be complicated. Start small, maybe 5 minutes at the end of the day. Ask yourself, what did I do today that I'm proud of? Where did I fall short of my own standards? Over time, this practice will help you become more aware of your motivations and less dependent on the approval of others. It's a way to take control of your inner world, one thought at a time. How can acceptance free us from the need for approval? Think about it for a moment. When we stop trying to control the uncontrollable, whether it's other people's opinions, external circumstances, or outcomes that are beyond our influence, we reclaim a sense of inner peace. This is the heart of Stoic philosophy. The ancient Stoic teacher Epictetus once said, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." In other words, acceptance isn't about giving up. It's about recognizing where our power truly lies and letting go of what we can't change. Let's take a real-world example. Imagine you're at work and a project you've poured your energy into gets criticized or even rejected. It's natural to feel frustrated or defensive, especially if you were seeking approval or validation. But what if, instead of fighting the situation or dwelling on the criticism, you chose to accept it, not as a defeat, but as an opportunity to learn and grow? By accepting the outcome, you free yourself from the emotional weight of needing others' approval. You shift your focus to what you can control: your response, your effort, and your mindset. This is where Stoicism shines. It teaches us that external validation is fleeting, but inner peace is lasting. When we practice acceptance, we stop tying our self-worth to how others see us. We start to see ourselves as complete, regardless of external judgment. So here's a question to reflect on. What's one situation in your life where you've been seeking approval? How might acceptance help you find freedom in that moment? By embracing what we can't change, we not only align ourselves with Stoic principles but also create space for genuine growth. Acceptance isn't passive. It's a powerful act of focusing on what truly matters. And when we do that, we stop chasing the approval of others and start living on our own terms. Stoicism teaches us that simplicity is not just a lifestyle choice. It's a pathway to clarity and peace. When we strip away the unnecessary, we uncover what truly matters, freeing ourselves from the constant chase for external validation. Seneca once said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." This isn't just about material possessions. It's about the mental and emotional clutter that weighs us down. By simplifying, we create space to focus on what's within our control, rather than being consumed by the opinions or approval of others. Think about it. How much of your day is spent trying to impress, please, or measure up to someone else's expectations? What if you could let go of that burden? One practical way to start is by decluttering your schedule. How many commitments do you take on simply because you feel you should? Stoicism invites us to question these habits. When we say no to what doesn't align with our values, we say yes to a life of greater purpose and authenticity. This doesn't mean living in isolation or rejecting all social connections. It's about choosing quality over quantity, whether that's in relationships, possessions, or daily tasks. When we simplify, we reduce the noise, and in that quiet, we find the freedom to live on our own terms. So, take a moment to reflect. What's one area of your life that could benefit from a little more simplicity? What's one thing you could let go of today to make room for what truly matters? So, what have we learned? Stoicism isn't about chasing the approval of others or bending ourselves to fit the expectations of the world. Instead, it's about turning inward, cultivating virtue, mastering our own minds, and finding peace within ourselves. External validation, while it might feel good in the moment, is fleeting. It's not something we can control, and it's not something worth sacrificing our integrity for. One of Stoicism's most revered figures once said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." That's the essence of Stoic philosophy. It's not about proving your worth to others, it's about living a life of purpose, guided by your own principles. When we focus on what's truly within our control, our actions, our choices, our character, we free ourselves from the endless cycle of seeking approval. Think about it. How often do you find yourself worrying about what others think? How much energy do you spend trying to fit in or meet someone else's expectations? Stoicism invites us to let go of that. It's not about rejecting relationships or becoming indifferent to others, but about prioritizing what truly matters: your own growth, your own peace, your own sense of self. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with this challenge. Reflect on how you can apply these Stoic principles in your own life. Where can you shift your focus from seeking approval to building inner strength? How can you start living with more purpose and less concern for what others think? If this resonates with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share how you're working to embrace these Stoic ideas. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe for more insights on living a life of wisdom, courage, and resilience. Thanks for watching, and remember, the only approval you truly need is your own.